Up next in the broadcast, results from this week's local elections show lukewarm support for the major political parties in Korea. But with harsh judgment against the president failing to materialize, President Park pledges to push ahead quickly with reforms. Rescuers make progress in finding another body from the deadly Seoul ferry sinking. The 44-year-old man was the father of a rescued 7-year-old on board. Meanwhile, the manhunt for the shipping company owner continues. And foreign ownership of local shares in Korea's stock market hits its high for the year as investors flock to market heavyweights in the electronics and auto sectors. Late Night Edition starts now. Welcome to ARIRANG News. I'm Sean Lim, and this is Late Night Edition. The nation had a day to process the results of the highly anticipated local elections, and both main political parties have reason to celebrate, although probably in a limited fashion. In some sense, the ruling party is seen as having fared well as it avoided a huge backlash from the recent ferry disaster, while the main opposition party could find some consolation in winning the nation's most high-profile race, the Seoul city mayor. Our Park Ji-won starts us off with a recap of the results.
The election results for the 17 heads of local governments show the ruling Saenuri Party victorious in 8 regions and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy in 9. Although Seoul was taken by the main opposition camp, the ruling party fared well in the metropolitan area. The party won the hotly contested Incheon mayoral race and Korea's most heavily populated province of Gyeonggi-do. However, the main opposition party claimed victories in the central region in both Chungcheongdo provinces, the new administrative city of Sejong, and Daejeon city. Considering these regions traditionally lean more moderate conservative, the main opposition party will be buoyed by its strong showing there. The nation's southwest and southeast regions didn't veer from their traditional preferences, although rival party or independent candidates had strong showings in the liberals' power base of Gwangju and the southern port city of Busan. As for Seoul, incumbent Mayor Park Won-soon from the main opposition party beat his rival Chung Mong-jun.
This is a victory of all citizens who called for a fundamental change following the Seoul ferry disaster. It's a victory for all citizens who work honestly.
I want to thank the citizens of Seoul. I humbly accept the choice of the people. I hope Mayor Park will lead Seoul by taking on the difficult situations facing the city.
The Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces were the last 2 provinces to confirm winners due to very tight races. In Gyeonggi-do, the ruling party's Nam Kyung-pil edged to victory in the governor's race against his rival by less than 1 percentage point. In Gangwon-do, incumbent Governor Choi Mun-soon also scored a tight win. During the local elections, 17 education chiefs were also elected, 13 of which are considered progressive. Seoul's new education superintendent will be Cho Hee-yeon, a liberal professor, after beating out 2 strong conservative candidates. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
So with no clear winner between the main rival parties in the June 4th local elections, pundits are interpreting the results in a number of ways. Our Na Hyung-kyung reports on what analysts are reading into the results.
The public raised the red flag against the ruling party while keeping the opposition on its toes. Experts say the local election results reflect public anger toward the current administration's handling of April's Seoul ferry disaster that claimed hundreds of lives. But they add, not handing over a landslide victory to the opposition means people are willing to give the Park Geun-hye administration a second chance.
We thank the people who have supported us and given us another chance. We will continue to carry out reforms within our party.
By snatching 9 of the 17 seats up for grabs, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has gained an upper hand for now. But the very narrow win, despite favorable conditions, indicates that the public is still wary of fully trusting the opposition party.
We will do our best to shed light on the truths behind the ferry disaster and focus on establishing fundamental solutions.
The upcoming July by-elections will be another opportunity for the rival parties to gauge public sentiment. Whether the ruling party can strike a chord with the public through President Park's soon-to-be-conducted cabinet reshuffle will be key in regaining support. The NPAD, in the meantime, will have to show and prove that its co-leadership is solid in order to avoid losing momentum. Na Hyun-kyung, ARIRANG News.
In politics, it's never too early to look ahead to the next election. The next big one here in Korea comes in 2017 when the nation will choose its next president. Our Son Jung-in tells us how Wednesday's election results may have provided some hints about who might appear on the next ballot.
Incumbent Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon's landslide victory has set the fates of two political big shots on opposite courses. Although Mayor Park has made it clear he has no intention to run in the next presidential race, some say the main opposition party may not have any better options when 2017 comes around.
The second phase of Park Won-soon's administrative policies will focus on integration. I will move in step with my supporters as well as with my opponents.
Speaking of opponents, Park's competitor and 7-term lawmaker Jung Mong-jun was defeated, a first in his 26-year political career, losing momentum toward becoming the ruling party's next presidential candidate. The beneficiary of his loss just may be Gyeonggi-do Governor-elect Nam Kyung-pil, who now rises near the top of the list of possible ruling party candidates in the 2017 race.
This will be done with President Park Geun-hye and the residents of Gyeonggi-do. I will give my all for renovating this province and Korea.
Another name being tossed around as potential presidential candidate from the ruling party is Jeju Island Governor-elect Won Hee-ryong. Won, along with Nam, are seen as young politicians who will help the ruling party transition from its older generation base. As for the main opposition party, Chungcheongnam-do Governor re-elect An Hee-jung is garnering attention. After serving time in jail for accepting illegal funds in the 2002 presidential race, An, one of late President Roh Moo-hyun's closest confidants, won the Chungcheongnam-do Governor seat in 2010. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
Well, the Korean people exercise their democratic right to vote in record numbers for the local elections on Wednesday. So what do they have to say about the results one day later? Our Shin Se-min went out to find out.
Public reaction to the results of Wednesday's local election has been somewhat divided, but all seem to agree that April's ferry accident was a deciding factor.
For this local election, I was greatly influenced by the Seoul ferry tragedy when casting my vote. I want more responsible leaders to represent me and my thoughts.
Simply put, I voted because I want a just society for all. Many politicians seem to ignore the voices of the people. Take the Seoul ferry accident, for example. Instead of leaders trying to save face, I want them to realize what they are missing and have already missed.
The elections were for local representatives, but were seen as a barometer of public sentiment following the ferry disaster. But each voter entered the polling booth with other issues in mind that matter to them.
Thinking of my mom, I want stronger support for working mothers. The disadvantages that minorities face should be addressed, especially for women and those that are weak.
Looking at the big picture, regardless of the political party, I just hope that those who have been elected keep their promises and keep their ears open to the people.
I believe humble, honest politicians make the best politicians. I hope all of those representing the people think twice and even 3 times before making pledges. Instead of following trends and going after fame, I think the elected officials should look toward making the community and the country a better place.
The results are out and the people have spoken. The nation now waits to see if those they've chosen to represent them live up to expectations. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
And speaking of following up on campaign pledges, with the election results providing her some breathing room, President Park Geun-hye has vowed to increase the pace of both Korea's economic recovery and her reform drives. At a luncheon with those of national merit and their families on Thursday, the president said she'll push ahead with her 3-year economic innovation plan and lay the foundation for a peaceful reunification with North Korea. In the aftermath of a deadly ferry accident in April, President Park also pledged to root out ill practices in society to make Korea a safer place to live. Following the ruling party's better-than-expected results in this week's local elections, the presidential office had said that the administration would do its best to honor the collective voice of the Korean public and bring about reforms to the nation. And concerned about the pronounced effect of last month's ferry disaster on the domestic economy, Korea's finance minister is calling on the business community to advance investment and employment. In a meeting with local business leaders, Hyun Oh-suk said Korea's economy was on a moderate recovery track, but he expressed concern about the prolonged impact of the ferry sinking on the service sector and on consumption. Later this month, the Finance Ministry will announce its economic policy direction plans for the second half of the year that will focus on raising the country's potential growth rate. Although the overall Korean economy continues on the path to recovery, the gross national income is not keeping pace. Last quarter's figure did climb, but at its slowest rate in 2 years. Our Hwang Ji-ae explains why.
It looks like the population's purchasing power in Korea is lagging behind the nation's economic growth. The Bank of Korea said Thursday that the nation's gross national income rose a mere 0.5% in the first quarter from the previous one, the slowest pace of expansion in 2 years. But the central bank says that the slower growth is largely coming from seasonal factors.
Above all, smaller dividends earned by Korean companies from their investments overseas compared to the fourth quarter last year resulted in slower G&I growth.
A country's gross national income includes not just the domestic output, but also the income received from abroad. And with companies paying dividends in respect of their financial year that often ends at the year end, the gross national income usually drops in the first quarter compared to a quarter earlier. Overall economic activities remained to be on a track to recovery as the nation's gross domestic product grew 0.9% in the January to March period from the previous 3 months. That matches up with the growth of around 1% that the economy has posted over recent quarters. From a year earlier, Asia's fourth largest economy grew 3.9% in the first quarter this year, accelerating from 3.7% growth in the fourth quarter. The central bank expects the domestic economy to grow 4% for all of this year. Hwang Ji-ae, ARIRANG News.
On the other hand, the appetite for investing in Korea shows little signs of slowing down. Stock holdings of the nation's publicly traded companies by foreign investors reached the highest level for the year this month. Blue-chip firms in tech and auto weigh heavy in the portfolios of overseas buyers whose stake totals over a third of the main Kospi index. Samsung Electronics, the nation's most capitalized firm, reports foreign ownership of just over 50%, as hopes are high that investors will benefit from the next-generation leadership transition of Korea's largest conglomerate. Experts say foreign investors are also putting their money on Korea's benefiting from the global recovery, especially in advanced economies. Korea and New Zealand will sit down for a fresh round of free trade negotiations next week. Korea's trade ministry says the meeting, the 7th of its kind, will take place in Auckland from June 8th to the 13th. The two sides will meet to narrow their differences on a range of issues, including intellectual property rights, country of origin, services, and investment. The previous round of talks was held in March.
Is also referred to as a Korean name, East.
Your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Join Sean Lim for a global perspective from the heart of Seoul. Breaking news, in-depth analyses, and a whole lot more. Late Night Edition, weekdays, live at midnight on ARIRANG TV.
Program. There has been no immediate comment out of Tehran.
Tokyo has renewed its claims to Korea's Dokdo Islets, and Seoul, in response, has condemned them and called them absurd. Japan's vice cabinet minister, along with Japanese lawmakers and officials, called for a resolution to the Dokdo dispute at a rally in Tokyo. But Korea's foreign ministry says there's nothing to dispute, as Dokdo has always been Korean territory. It added that Tokyo should stop making provocative claims and that Japan's relations with Korea and other countries in the region would continue to suffer if it continues to deny its imperialistic past. Joint military drills between South Korean and U.S. forces are a regular occurrence on South Korean soil, but they've never been conducted on American soil before until now. Seoul says 4 weeks of joint drills will run at Fort Irwin in California from Monday to July 1st. 170 Korean members of an infantry and special forces unit will take part. A Korean military official said the goal for the exercise is to enhance joint combat interoperability by carrying out joint war missions and small unit combats. The new head of a U.S. organization that promotes relations with Asia says North Korea's nuclear program and humanitarian aid should be dealt with as separate issues. Frank Januzzi, president of the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Foundation, said that people-centered diplomacy through informal meetings is the key to approaching Pyongyang at this point. He also said he's not optimistic about a swift resumption of the six-party talks on the North Korean nuclear program, adding that Pyongyang does not seem to be open to negotiations. Januzzi was a key member of President Obama's first presidential campaign team, serving as a director for policies related to the Korean Peninsula. Now for the latest on the Seoul ferry disaster, one body was recovered on Thursday morning, raising the death toll to 289 after more than 2 weeks without any progress, but it was nowhere near or inside the ferry. The body of a 44-year-old male was found in waters 35 kilometers northwest of the accident site. Identified only by his surname Cho, the man was headed to Jeju-do Island with his wife and 2 sons, but only his 7-year-old son was rescued on the day of the sinking. Search teams had resumed underwater operations on Wednesday to locate those still missing, as families of the victims criticized that not enough was being done to recover or prevent bodies from drifting away. The European Central Bank on Thursday cut its benchmark interest rate to a near zero level, a record low, matching market expectations amid deflation woes. In a bid to boost tepid economic recovery, the ECB lowered the rate down to 0.1 percentage point, or it lowered it down 0.1 percentage point to 0.15%. President Mario Draghi also announced that banks will have to pay to store money with the Eurozone Central Bank as it attempts to encourage lending. The EU economy only grew 0.2% in the first quarter, with inflation hovering around 0.5%, well below the ECB's goal of just under 2%. The Chinese government has lashed out at the United States over comments it made about the recent anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. In light of the 25th anniversary of the protests, the White House honored those who lost their lives in the brutal crackdown and urged Beijing to admit to the killings of protesters during the historic democratic movement. In response, the Chinese Foreign Ministry lodged a formal complaint to the U.S. over the remarks, saying they gravely interfere with China's internal affairs. Meanwhile, over 100,000 people took part in a massive candlelight vigil in Hong Kong last night to remember the brutal suppression of pro-democracy activists. Leading up to the anniversary, the Chinese government cracked down heavily on any mention of the massacre in 1989, prohibiting a public discussion and even censoring online references. Diplomacy is in high gear in Brussels this week as the heads of G7 nations have resumed their 2-day summit for the first time since expelling Russia from the group. Discussions were dominated by the crisis in Ukraine, including measures to return stability to the eastern part of the country, where fighting between the military and pro-Russian forces continues. The Group of 7 issued a joint statement condemning Russia for its intervention in Ukraine and warned of additional economic sanctions should Moscow fail to do its part to dial back the violence.
The G7 has indicated that dialogue, de-escalation, and the process born from the elections must be encouraged. At the same time, the G7 is ready to intensify and put in place targeted sanctions if necessary.
The world's leading industrialized nations continued their meeting on Thursday, also focusing on economics, trade, climate, and energy policy.
Hello and welcome to Late Night Sports. I'm Stephen Che. Now, in the world of sports, results are king. And with that in mind, South Korea's lackluster performances in recent matches have pushed them down to 57th on the FIFA World Rankings. Of the 5 friendlies they played in 2014, they won only 2 and lost 3, scoring 3 goals while conceding 7. But with the World Cup just over a week away, the national team is less concerned about rankings and more about getting into top form after a recent loss to Tunisia.
If we're white at the beginning of training camp and red at the World Cup, then right now we are pink.
Manager Hong also told reporters in Miami, South Korea's goal in Brazil, and that's to first advance from the group stage. His team will look to shore up the loose ends in a friendly against Ghana on June 9th before the World Cup. And, of course, that friendly is June 10th in Korea. And heading to the Greens, the 2015 President's Cup captains were named, with Jay Haas leading the Americans and Nick Price heading the international team. And Captain Price chose Chae Kyung-ju, also known as KJ Choi, as vice captain, with the team tournament taking place in South Korea's port city of Incheon next year. Chae said it would be a pleasure to work with Price to help end the world team's losing streak at the biennial event. And now let's take a trip stateside for the National Hockey League Stanley Cup Finals Game 1 matchup between the Los Angeles Kings and the New York Rangers. Both fought hard to get this far, and the Rangers scored first, eventually making it 2-0 before the Kings answered back and tied it 2-2 in the second period. It headed to overtime, and there Justin Williams got it past the goalie just 5 minutes in to lead the Kings to the 3-2 victory. And over in the NBA, the Donald Sterling controversy took a surprising turn as the LA Clippers owner decided to drop the lawsuit against the league and sell his team. Now all that's left is for NBA owners to approve the $2 billion sale of the Clippers to former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer. Sterling came under fire in April for racist comments he made, leading to a heated public backlash and a lifetime ban from the NBA. And finally, we come back home to the KBO. The league announced that cheerleaders will be back in action starting next Tuesday. But before that, it's the Nexen Heroes taking on the NC Dinos in Masan. Now we go to the first inning. It's Park Byung-ho bringing home the first run for Nexen. And that's all before a 4-run inning by NC in the second inning. Started by Son Shi-hyun's sac fly. It's 4-1 NC. Then we go to the fourth inning. Nexen's An Tae-young. He hits a 2-run home run. And adding a run in the sixth inning, it's tied 4-4. At the bottom, an error brings Mo Chang-min home to put NC up. And it goes back and forth, but NC ends up winning this one 9-5. And now let's take a look at the scores from around the league. And that's all I have for now. This has been Stephen Che. I'll be back next week for more from the world of sports.
Kim Bo-kyung is standing by at the Weather Center to give us an update on the weather for the upcoming long weekend. Bo-kyung, fill us in.
Sean, we can expect early summer conditions over the holiday. Now, June 6th is Memorial Day here in Korea, and conditions in general should be good for outdoor activities. In fact, daytime high in Seoul is forecast to jump to 31 degrees on Friday. However, there is a slight possibility of rain in the central regions, so grab an umbrella on your ways out just in case. On to Friday's readings. Daegu and Gwangju reached 28 degrees while Busan hits 24. On to other places. Daejeon jumps to 29 degrees while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang make it to 18 and 20. Well, holidays are great for spending quality time with family and friends, but let's not forget to commemorate our heroes on Friday. And that's all for Korea, and we leave you with the international weather.
That's Late Night Edition at this hour. I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.